Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for making it back to another episode of It's My Money with Patrina Dixon, or if you're listening to the Money Exchange podcast. I am so excited about this episode. I recently had to deal with this episode with my daughter. And when I met this young man that you're going to hear from, I'm like, wow, I wish my daughter and I met you before she started her process, but she was already through her process. But he has some wonderful information for those of you that rent, and he's going to provide you education for the rental process, as well as how you can negotiate your rent. So please listen in and wait. If you're driving, it's okay, because you can listen to this whenever you want. You have to subscribe. But those of you that are not driving, maybe cleaning up your house, you want to stop, grab your pen and pencil, because he's going to give you some tips that's going to help with your next, not just when you start renting, but even when it's time to renew your lease. So with me, I have Justin. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Patrina. How are you doing today?
I'm excited. I was so excited to tell them about you. I forgot to tell them who I am. So you all know me. I'm Patrina, your personal finance coach and your international best-selling author. And you want to know more about what I have going on, drop down in the show notes if you're looking at this on YouTube, or if you are listening to this on any podcast audio platform. So Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself today.
Yeah, so I am really excited to be here. I am an author and a real estate consultant based in Dallas now. And my background is in residential property management, which I ended up in by accident a little bit. So just a little bit about my backstory. I left the job that I had and I was going to graduate school. And this was around the 2002 timeframe. And my plan was to graduate and become a management consultant. And that plan fell completely apart because of the dot-com bubble and all of that. So when I came back home, my mother, who had been a real estate agent back in the 80s, she was investigating about how to purchase properties by paying the back taxes on them. So she just suggested that we just go look at one or two properties. And we did that, and that then turned into a 20-year career in property management as we acquired properties and then repaired them to be rented out. So that's really where my experience on this topic comes from, is from the perspective of being a landlord, being a property manager, and really taking people through that rental process and having that 20 years of experience with people who are renting on my properties.
Yeah. So I love how you brought in how you got connected working with your mom and what she was doing. But you said your undergrad and then your grad. So you got to tell them where those are from, because I want them to know, like, Justin is the real deal here. He's got 20 years of experience and actually being on the side of what he's going to tell you about the secrets of. But tell them your background a little bit of undergrad and grad.
Yeah, so for undergrad, I was in the great city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, going to the Wharton School of Business. And then for graduate school, I was down in Charlottesville, Virginia, going to the Darden School of Business. So I got to tell you, having gone, they're wonderful schools. I had a great experience while I was there. But even having gone through those schools, I still did not get a lot of this personal financial education, personal negotiation skills and tips that you really need out there in the real world, which is just, frightening that we don't get that kind of education in school. Especially given the amount of money that we're spending on that, but that's a whole nother topic.
Well, that's the reason why I am doing what I do, for that exact reason. So I'm glad to hear you. I mean, I'm sort of glad and sad to hear you say that, because oftentimes, given what I do, people think it's just certain areas, a certain population of people that's not getting this information. No, it's like broad, where, you can be in like institutions such as the ones you named, it's still not being taught there. So there's
Right.
a lot of assumption that if you come from money or you go to somewhere that costs a lot of money, it's different than being in places that's not the case. So even if you have a lot of money, if you don't know how to manage it, it just comes in and goes out, or gets spent faster. So I'm glad that you brought that in. That was a really good point.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times people get that if people have that education, they're getting it from their family, they're getting it from resources like the show and others where they're going out and seeking that information and then putting it to use. And that kind of leads a little bit into how I wrote this book, because I was kind of between property management gigs. And someone suggested that I write a book. I'm like, okay, well, let's go see what this looks like. So I go down to the bookstore and I'm looking at the real estate section, and I see books for owners and managers and investors and insurance agents and everybody in real estate under the sun, except the renters. And it's like, why do they need a book? They're just the ones bringing over $500 billion to the table every year to pay rent. Like, why would you need a book for them?
Yeah.
But seeing that gap, that's really what prompted me to write Rental Secrets, because there was that gap in terms of education and resources that were out there.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Like I said, I recently, when I say we, it wasn't me going through the experience, but I felt like I was with my daughter. And when you and I met, I'm like, wow, we didn't know that. And we didn't know that. So I can't wait to get into the meat of this conversation, because I think it's going to be really great, especially for the audience that, tend to follow me, that are renters. I think this is going to be really good because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, this is not just for the person that's starting out to rent. This is even when you renew your rental arrangements, right? Rental agreements or whatever they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. At the foundation of it is the relationship between the renter and the landlord not only should be positive, but is essential for both renter and landlord.
That's right. That's right.
Because if you think about it from the standpoint of the landlord, this renter, whoever they are living in your retirement, literally. So having a great relationship with them helps ensure that your retirement investment is there when it gets time for you to actually need it and use it.
I love it. I love it. So let's start off. Let's for either renter, what is one of the most essential tips they should know? Like what is that fundamental thing that they should know about the process if you had to give just one?
If I had to give just one, it starts basically in chapter 1 of my book. I talk about the fact that you can actually negotiate. Because if you don't think you can do it, then it's not going to happen.
You can negotiate.
Yes.
I mean, we're going to go to a few other tips, but this one is a big one, because I think people think this is the price that they've listed it for and that's it. So let's go deeper there. So the number one thing, you can negotiate, right? Now let's talk a little bit about that. Tell us how you want them to understand that process.
Yes. So this is absolutely not a retail situation. The property manager or the landlord that you're dealing with, they are under pressure, because when you think about it from their perspective, when they purchased this property and started renting it, they essentially started a small business. And they are taking on all of the headaches that come with that, just from the standpoint of running that business. So that's multiple sources of pressure on them in terms of marketing, legal issues, maintenance issues, customer relations. All of that is what they're taking on when they become a landlord. On top of that, they're also competing with other landlords for your business.
Yes.
All of these landlords are out here. They're looking for people who have great credit. They're looking for people who get along and play well with others. They're looking for people who have the proper amount of income. They're competing for those people. So it's not just, oh, I'm competing for this rental spot against other renters. Landlords are competing against each other too.
Yeah. For you to be in their spot.
For you. Yes. You are the quality commodity that they are looking for.
That's right.
Because if nobody rents the building, it's a big useless paperweight.
I love it so much. I think that's, I love how you put that, because I think oftentimes, and that's why I couldn't wait to have you on the show, is that I think sometimes when people are looking to rent, and I think this is true for other things as well, but we're talking about renting in the way that we are, that the renter, they are what do I want to call it, that they have this hasty or this hurried thing that they need to do, because otherwise they're going to rent it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
No, they want you there just as much as you want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, your information, your book is helping people to understand that without you, the renter, they have an empty space, and that's not
Yeah.
the ideal situation for them. So I love
Yeah.
this fact.
Yeah.
Yes.
And kind of the next thing to think about is, what does having that empty space mean for the landlord?
Mhm.
Because we all kind of understand that, oh, if the space isn't rented, the landlord isn't making any money. Like that's kind of basic. But when you dig into that a little deeper, being a landlord is not like, for example, owning a car dealership.
Mhm.
Okay. So if I have a car dealership and I don't sell a car today, I can sell it tomorrow, and I haven't really lost out on any money. You know, time value of money a little bit, but I haven't really lost out on any money. Whereas if you're a landlord, a little bit of your product is expiring every day. Like if my apartment is vacant, it was vacant last week, I can never rent last week's vacancy for anything.
Mhm.
Nobody's going to pay for that. It's
Yeah.
gone forever.
Yep.
So there's a sense of urgency that landlords have to get someone in that space. In fact, I spent some time working for a property management company, and there are these meetings that take place weekly, like which apartments are coming up vacant, which ones were vacant, did you lease them, what's the situation, what kind of traffic did you have, all that. So there's these weekly meetings that are going on kind of behind the scenes as far as a renter is concerned, and we're all talking about these vacant apartments and how to get them rented. But at some point, everybody gets sick of talking about the same apartment. So whoever rents that apartment becomes kind of this hero within the company behind the scenes.
Mhm.
So when renters, what that means from the renter standpoint is, when you're out there looking for properties, if you see minor things that are wrong with the property, if you see properties that where the view is not the greatest, or it might be facing the street as opposed to being facing the inside courtyard, or there are little things that make an apartment stay on the market longer,
Mhm.
and that increases the possibility that that property manager, or even that property manager's regional manager, is going to negotiate on that apartment, because they need to get it rented so they can so their product can stop expiring on a daily basis and get somebody in there and start that cash flow coming.
All right. I love this segment. So negotiation. So talk about, from a property manager standpoint, I remember you telling me they go through a list, like, okay, the person has this type of credit or that type of credit. They want a window versus not. They want stairs close to elevator. Can you go through the
Yeah.
process from both perspectives, the rental agent, and then how a renter should have the level of conversation depending on how they want to negotiate?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So when I do my live event, I kind of go through this role play where we have someone, kind of pretending to call a property manager about a particular property. And you'll call in and they'll answer the phone, and they'll say, what are you looking for? And you'll let them know, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom apartment. And then they'll start asking you a series of questions. Would you like to be on the first or second floor? Would you like to have a pool view or a courtyard view? Would you like to be near the laundry room? And in asking these questions, what the property manager is trying to do is to figure out which apartments on the property to show you, so that when they give you when you come for a tour, they can be kind of precise and go directly to those apartments that fit what you said you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's something else that's going on too. As you answer those questions, they are crossing properties off the list of what's available to get down to the few that they're going to show you. But what's not happening is they're not talking to you about the trade-offs that are being made when those properties are crossed off the list.
Hmm.
So you may have said, no, I want to be on the first floor and I want to be next to the pool. Well, they've crossed off the second floor apartment that may have been cheaper than the one on the first floor. They've crossed off the apartment that's further away from the pool, which may have been cheaper. And they're not telling you that that's what they're doing. So you don't know what trade-offs are being made when you're answering those questions.
Yeah.
So really, it's important that when you answer those questions, that you're telling them your must-haves.
Mm-hmm.
If you really have to be next to the pool, then by all means tell them that.
Mm-hmm.
But for most cases, people don't really need to be that close to the pool and have that direct view. But people don't know what trade-offs they're making because of that. Because there's this within the property management industry, they do what's called amenity-based pricing. So when they add that pool, let's say the apartment is $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So when they add that pool, they're taking the cost of that pool and they're dividing it over the number of apartments in that apartment community.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're adding a little bit to the rent of each apartment. Now, the amount they add to the apartment is also based on how close that apartment is to the amenity kind of, and the logic is how much enjoyment of that amenity is that apartment going to get relative to the others.
That's right.
So not knowing that, you're there, you're answering all these questions, you're giving away all this information, and you don't know what trade-offs you're making because nobody's ever told you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And so now that, you're sharing the rental secrets, and you see you all that's looking at us, you can see the rental secrets. He has a book, it's right behind him. He's going to tell you how you can grab that copy, because I know you're going to want one if you're in a rental situation or your children, siblings, maybe in that situation, you want to grab a copy of his book. But now that you're sharing this, right? From the renter's perspective, how do they, because most people, like, just logically, you're talking about what you want versus what you don't want, right? Mm-hmm. How do you begin to, as a renter, put in your head, okay, I want this will be nice, but if it's going to cost me $500 more, maybe not. Like, mm-hmm. How does one get their head around that? Because oftentimes it's more about what you want versus understanding, if you're not right next, $500 more can put you close to the pool. But if you're swimming, you probably are a person that's maybe in good shape. You can walk, another flight of stairs, or you can, walk further away from it be further away from it to get to it, and you can save $500. So how can you get a renter to think about it from that perspective?
Well, it's important to talk about needs versus wants. Okay. So you may actually need to be on the first floor. Maybe your elderly parent is going to be living with you. That's a need. Mm-hmm. Or you may need an apartment that may have a little bit of backyard space because you have a dog. Those are needs. Mm-hmm. Now a want could be, I want to be right next to the laundry room. It's real easy to run over there and all of that. But think a little bit more broadly about your wants, and let me back up. You may think you need to be close to the laundry room because that will make your life easier because you've got 3 kids and you're doing laundry all the time and that kind of thing. But if you think about that a little more broadly, you may not need to be next to the laundry room. You just may need some laundry baskets that have wheels on them.
I love it. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I love it so much. Yeah. And what can you talk a bit, you did do like, at a high level, how the math is done when they have closer to the pool, they put it across mm-hmm. the apartments. But like, what sort of savings could one see when they start to think about it broadly, close to the laundry room, close to the pool, what that does for the overall monthly amount that they're paying for a rental?
You could easily be talking differences of $30 to $50
a month.
A month. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Depending on how close to the pool you are, how big the community is, whether, and some communities actually have third stories mm-hmm. On them. And not all of those have elevators. So a lot of those factors of where the apartment is on the property can really affect what you're paying for rent. Now there's another interesting factor that can affect what you're paying for rent too, which is the time of year that you rent your apartment. Okay. So if you think about what happens in any given calendar year, so in the May-June timeframe, there are about 4.5 million college students graduating across the country, and they're all excited to get their new place and they're ready to go. And then in addition to them, there is another 5 million or so parents that are switching school districts. So they're moving and they want to get situated before the school year starts in August or September. So that summer time frame, there's like 9 or 10 million people that are moving around, changing the locations where they're living. And all of the landlords know this. So the ask, and it happens every year. So the asking rents during the summer are higher than the rest of the year, just because they know there's going to be all of this demand because, life happens. However, when you get into the November, December, January timeframe, there are going to be fewer customers available. And landlords know this. And yes, there are going to be fewer apartments, but apartments are still coming available because, life happens. So what ends up happening is those landlords, they know there are going to be fewer renters out there looking for their apartments. So they are willing to do deals, and the pricing is lower because of that, because they don't want to wait until summer. So they don't want to lose 6 months of income because their product is expiring every day. Or at least a little bit of it is expiring every day. So they don't want to wait until summer to rent that. So, and there have been studies that have been done. That's basically the result of those studies is, depending on the size of the apartment you're looking for, and depending on the city that you're in, you can save up to 7% on your rent just by renting during those kind of off seasons. And if your rent's $1,000, that's $70.
Yeah.
Like that's real money. That's like grocery money. That's car payment. I mean, that's real money.
And those months are November to what?
It varies from city to city.
Oh, okay.
But typically you're looking at like late fall into winter are the months where that discount is the highest.
Okay, got it.
And that discount is driven by the need of the landlord to not leave these spaces vacant, even though there aren't as many renters that are looking.
Yeah. And I like moving in the winter is like, oh, because you never know when depending on where you are in the country, like, is it going to be snowing the day you're moving and that sort of stuff. So moving in the winter in general is not ideal. So that definitely makes sense. So now we've talked about negotiation, and that was like the number one or one of the most essential things. What's another secret that renters should be aware of? Oh, I'm looking at the red behind your head and it says rental reduction secrets. I like that even better. So what's another one that the listeners could think about when they go into their renewal or starting out renting for the first time?
Yeah. So renters actually should see. So within our culture and society, a lot of renters typically think of their landlord as the enemy. If you watch like a Judge Judy show or any of those judge shows on television, and there's a landlord renter dispute, like it's knockdown, drag out drama. There might be a chair thrown across the room. Like that's typically how the landlord renter relationship is presented. And it really does renters a disservice in a specific way, because it prompts renters to not think about the rental situation from the landlord's perspective. And anytime you're going to negotiate with somebody, it's important to understand, where are they coming from? What are their hot button issues? How can I help them resolve those issues so I get what I want, they get what they want, and we create kind of this win-win.
Yes.
So when we talk about a renewal situation, annually, the landlord's going to send out this renewal letter to you, and it'll have a new rent amount on it. Mm-hmm. So now once you receive that, now you know what the landlord is thinking. So now from your perspective, you're thinking about, okay, I rented this apartment because it's 30 minutes west of my job. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand, like, actually, no, let me back up a step. So that renewal rate that the landlord gives you is based on an analysis of the properties around them. So they will take a map, they'll go out maybe a mile, and they'll draw a circle. Mm-hmm. And all the communities that fall within that circle that they believe are their competition, they're going to be pricing against. Okay. But then they assume that's their competition. But really, in reality, their competition is anybody that you would rent from, as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
So you rented that apartment because it's a half hour east of your job. Well, there's plenty of great apartment complexes that are half hour west of your job that they are not factoring into their analysis.
Okay.
They're also not factoring in, you may want to, instead of renting a 2-bedroom apartment, you may want to rent a 2-bedroom bungalow. They're not considering that their competition.
Yeah.
So when you get this letter, then actually go out into the marketplace, and Craigslist you can really do this easily on Craigslist. Go out there and, you're looking for properties that are maybe a half hour west of your job, and get those prices. So now when you go to your landlord and you're discussing this renewal offer, you can tell them, look, I know you made this renewal offer for $1,550, but there are options out there that are comparable for my situation that are $1,450 or $1,350. They're, and they're real viable market. It's real viable market information that your landlord does not have, because they didn't look for it, because it's not part of that analysis.
Okay.
So now that's not to say that they're going to reduce that renewal rate from $1,550 down to $1,350, because that's what the other place was offering, but they may come down $50. Mm-hmm. And that's another, and that's $600 a year that you are now not paying to the landlord that you can now put towards something else.
Yes.
So bringing that market information to them is you're doing them a service. Like, you thought your competition was this, but that's not true. Really, your competition is all of this. Mm-hmm. And I have other options. So we need to discuss where we're going to end up. And when you bring information like that to a landlord, or actually even better, to a property management company, now that's something that the person in the office that you can talk to can take to their regional manager and make your case for them or for you. Because a lot of people are living in these corporate apartment complexes, and they're like, well, how do I negotiate with a corporation? And how you do it is you really speak their language. So if you're speaking the language of market competition, and that you have other options, then that's more likely to get through to them. And then on top of that, when you throw in the fact that there's a cost to recruit a new renter for them, there's a cost to clean and repair the apartment for that new renter, there's a cost to the vacancy that you are going to incur should I choose to leave. And this is the point that I really want all the renters out there to hear, is that you are in charge of whether they pay those costs or not. If you stay, none of those costs are incurred. If you leave, 100% absolutely they will incur those costs in getting a new person in there.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if that vacancy cost will just be a week for them to turn the apartment around, or if it will be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. But it doesn't matter. It's there, it exists, and it's real for them. I had this experience where I'm managing a community in Mountain View, California, stone's throw away from Google. We had an apartment that literally, I mean, and this is like hottest of hot markets. We had an apartment that sat for 2 months because people walked in and they didn't like the view out of the master bedroom window. And that apartment rented for $3,000 a month, and we lost $6,000 just because of that.
Wow.
So don't think that, all of these apartments are going so quickly and all of that. There are still long-term vacancy situations that happen for really minor reasons. But they do happen out there, and that vacancy cost is real for landlords.
So they want, just as bad as the renter want to get in their ideal desired apartment, the renter needs you to get into it. So they're typically, like you said, these are conversations that they would go through, but they won't if the person doesn't initiate them. So I love that.
Right.
Now, the other thing that you said, I want to make sure that it's heard, that renewal letter typically comes with an increase. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Is there an average? I know it differs by property management and place and all that, but is there an average of how much rent goes up year over year in a renewal situation?
So the logic behind the renewal letter is every year we experience inflation at some level. Okay. So the cost of providing the service increases. So the cost of all the supplies, the labor costs for the people that they're paying to manage this place and keep it running, those costs go up every year. So as a result, they pass that inflation cost onto the renter. Now that's the kind of baseline. Okay. So typically that's been like the 2 to 5, 2 to 3, 4% kind of increases. Okay. In addition to that, we also have the situation where not enough housing is being built on an annual basis based on the population growth in these different areas. And that's going to hit differently depending on which location you're in. But that's part of what's leading to this increase of these rent increases of 5 to 10%. In a lot of different cities. Now, it doesn't always hit that way. As you saw, like in 2020, a lot of rents were actually dropping in core urban areas across the country because people were choosing something different, and the amenity of being close to shops and restaurants wasn't as important as the amenity of having a backyard, which is more prevalent in suburban areas rather than urban central ones. So that increase is going to kind of vary across the board. And as a renter, kind of, you can expect that the industry is going to operate in that way. But you still have influence over what you're dealing with. And that kind of leads to another great tip, in that if you are handy in any sort of way, it can be really useful for you, because as a landlord, if you call me and you tell me, say, my faucet is broken. Okay. Well, the next steps that I have to take on top of everything else that I'm doing is I have to contact 3 vendors. I have to get them out there to take a look at this faucet, see how much is going to get a quote from each of them, choose from that set of quotes, and then be back at the apartment to let that vendor in when it's time to do the repair. So there's a lot of time, energy, and stress involved in just this simple, getting this simple repair made. Now, or I may have a maintenance person to do that kind of thing, possibly. But I'm paying that person like probably north of $50 an hour to go and do that. Now, Where this comes relevant to the renter is if you are handy in any way and you can possibly replace that faucet for me, then it becomes something that would have been on my plate that is no longer on my plate.
Got it.
And that has value because I'm putting out, as property manager, I'm putting out fires all day long. And if you can quench one of those fires for me, you become one of my favorite people.
Yeah, cha-ching.
Yeah, so that absolutely becomes a negotiation tactic, especially if your landlord lives out of state and is self-managing. Yeah. It is so helpful to have a renter who can be like, okay, I can take care of this, or I can mow the lawn and take care of the landscaping, so you don't have to hire somebody for that. But you're changing the calculus of my expenses.
Yes.
And that has negotiation value as well.
Love it. So Justin, this has been phenomenal. So we talked about negotiation factors and, needs versus wants and the time of year, depending on location, geography, what that will mean to a renter. We talked about annual increases, knowing the market competition and options. So before we end, what is it that you want to say to the renters that are out there? We're going to get into where they can find you and your book. And those of you that are renting, even if you're renting now or considering renting or know somebody that's close to you that will be renting soon, you want to grab his book and follow him wherever he is. He is the truth on this topic. Like I'm not even a renter, and I learned a lot. I was like in awe of some of the things that he talked about. And you would think that doesn't apply to renters. It's more on people that are trying to own properties. But it was really insightful, and I encourage you all to check him out, grab his book. But Justin, what do you want them to walk away with today? If they don't grab your book or follow you after today, listening to this episode, what do you want them to leave with?
What I want them to leave with is the relationship between renter and landlord is incredibly valuable for both of you. And to not think of the landlord as your enemy, think of the landlord as someone, as a service provider that's providing you the service of housing and having a roof. And when you think of them as a service provider, you're changing the mental calculus of how you interact with them. And just changing that mental calculus is really, really helpful. This is a lot of renters think the landlord is out to get as much money out of me as possible. And that's really not what property management is about. Property management is about being the best steward for the asset, which is that apartment community, and the relationships in that community factor into the value of that asset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Justin, I've mentioned to those listening that they're going to want to check you out. They're going to want your book. How do they do that? Where do they find you?
Yes. So our website is rentalsecrets.net. And there's actually a free gift there for your audience when they arrive. But I'm also on Instagram at Rental Secrets, when my handle is at Rental Secrets, as well as I have a virtual live event coming up, and they can check that out at rentalsecrets.net/event.
Great. And the book, they can find the book on your website.
Yes, they can find the book on the website, and they can also find it at Amazon.com and Barnes and Nobles, and all the usual suspects.
Great. And if you didn't write this down, it will be in the show notes. So the links that he just mentioned, the places where he can be found, his event, the books, all of that will be in the show notes. So make sure you drop down and take a look at the links that will be there. And that's either if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on any of the audio platforms. And remember, so that you are notified of all the episodes that we make available for you, make sure you subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the little red button I think is going to be over there where it says subscribe. Make sure you hit that, put on your notifications. If you are listening to this on an audio platform, make sure you subscribe there as well. And then both Justin and I will love for you to leave comments. Let us know what you think about what you heard. If there's there's a question that comes about after you listen to this that I can't answer, I'll forward it along to Justin so he can get the answer to you, because this is vital information for you if you are renting today or considering renting soon. So please, please, please make sure that you take a look at everything that he has available. I appreciate you for rocking with me. I appreciate you joining every time that you do. Again, I'm Patrina Dixon, your It's My Money lady across all social platforms. Every time that you come, know that I appreciate you, whoever you are, wherever you're listening from. Thank you.